Welcome to Householders, a conversation about American life as Zen practice. I'm Inga Annie Wade.
And I'm Kyosaku John Mitchell, and we're lay members of the Atlanta Soto Zen Center. I don't remember how much I've talked about this, but I have become increasingly committed to a spiritual practice that's not, strictly speaking, a Zen practice, namely this form of Qigong that I learned last year. I started learning last year.
What's
And
Qigong?
Qigong is a Taoist movement practice involving raising and directing bodily energy. And it's based in the same sort of schema of how the body and energy work as Zen is. So, Zen breathing instructions, particularly Rinzai breathing instructions, but Soto as well, talk about Qi as this bodily energy that's raised through the abdominal breathing in Zazen. And Qigong is moving that same energy around the body using these deliberate, flowy movements. It looks like Tai Chi if you've seen that. But the way I would characterize the difference is that Tai Chi is working with physical forces, like physics forces, like gravity and balance and the weight of your body. You're sort of using your muscles to maneuver your body in space around certain, physics that are taking place, and gaining control over your body in that, in the midst of those forces. Whereas Qigong is about biological forces, energy in the body, and stirring up the physical energy in your body and moving it through and getting it flowing in a healthy way. So these aren't really separable things. Like you're doing both things in both practices, but the sort of discipline of Tai Chi is more like a martial art, where like the control over your body moving through space is the thing that you're training. Whereas in in Qigong, control is not really the right word, but proper and healthy flow of energy in your body is the
what does
goal.
that even mean, though?
Well, what it means, like, how do you move your fingers? What is the force that is moving that when you say, I'm going to move my fingers, and then your fingers move.
Okay.
The energy in your body that causes that movement to happen is what I mean.
Okay, how's that different?
Well, it's not like it's not different. It's a different dimension of movement. It's like you're concentrating on the way that that your like awake, alive energy in your body is flowing, as opposed to concentrating on how, like, where your hand is in space. Like I want to say almost internal versus external is the difference, but that's not a clean description. But like a Tai Chi movement of the hand might be concerned with like the weight of your hand in space, and like the further away from your body it is, the more muscle tension there is in your arm holding it in place, and you're working with those kind of forces. Whereas a Qigong movement of your hand would concentrate on the sort of flowing out of almost the like neural information of what to do with the hand, and feeling that happen in real time, and being sure that you're in touch and almost mindful of that sensation.
Okay.
So it's not something that you can really explain.
That does sound like something I might just have to like do them both and kind of experiment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've done Tai Chi once, and I remember it being a lot harder than I thought it was gonna be.
Yeah.
I'm like, isn't this what old people do? Like, I always see like, in Asia, like the old people in the park will be doing Tai Chi. And I'm like...
Yeah, for sure. Because it's a form of exercise. That's sort of a good way of of demonstrating what I mean by these physical forces. Like the movements are designed to create exactly the right sort of healthy resistance in your body so that, it keeps your body healthy without being like super rigorous. Qigong is more akin to a meditation practice, like a moving meditation practice, in terms of why you would do it or why you would learn it and why you would learn any particular sequence of it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I've heard that people say Tai Chi is a movement meditation, or even yoga is a movement meditation. So why particularly Qigong, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Why are you drawn to that over Tai Chi and yoga or something like that?
Well, it was recommended to me by a Zen friend, not someone from our Sangha, someone I know from somewhere else. Because, and this is a particular form. There's Qigong is a vast array of different things, as is Tai Chi, as is yoga. But the particular form that I was recommended was one for based in, really centered in the same abdominal breathing that you do in Zazen, and it's one for kind of straightening out and directing the flow of qi raised in that kind of breathing into motion, into life. So I was having a little bit of trouble at certain times kind of moving from Zazen into reality. I was coming out of Zazen feeling very heavy and kind of overloaded. And this was shortly after really starting to develop this kind of Rinzai style breathing to raise energy while sitting. Yeah. And again, when I say energy, I'm talking about something that's very physical and real and obvious. I'm not talking about some sort of spiritual, metaphysical, abstract force that I'm imagining. I'm talking about sensations in my body.
Well, I was curious about that because I've heard people, the word qi is in Qigong.
Yeah.
And I feel like when people explain qi to me, they're usually talking about like not a physical energy or not a scientific energy, like more of a metaphysical energy or something like that.
Well, it depends what you mean by scientific. And like if you believe in the scientific discipline of that by which Chinese medicine has been developed for a long time, the same one that brings like acupuncture, for example, into sort of mainstream practice, then you are at least giving some credence to the, experimental rigor of what works in Chinese medicine. But if you don't accept that, then you don't accept that.
I don't know. I don't know that much about it, to be honest.
Well, all I can say is that it was an abstract idea to me until I tried this practice. And then it was suddenly obvious that there was a physical sensation that was involved and that it wasn't something that I was unfamiliar with. It was something that I live with all the time. I just had no discipline for working with it. And so in Zazen, I was raising this huge amount of it, and it was overloading me, and I wasn't really able to kind of go back into day-to-day life smoothly. And so he recommended this practice to me. And one of the big reasons, and this is a little more like philosophical about it than I care to be most of the time, but one of the things about this particular Qigong discipline that I think is cool, and that feels related to my Zen practice, is that it's a emptiness-based practice. It's sort of working with the fact that life energy arises out of emptiness and recedes back into emptiness. So if it's it's a very good counterpart to the kinds of sensory and perceptual experiences that happen in sitting practice in Zen. And so it's a complement. And so, I mean, that's the explanation of why I do all of this. But the thing that I'm happy to talk more about that, but I also finished the sequence for the first time this week. Like I can do the entire, it's like a 7-minute routine, and I was working on it one step at a time for months and months, and I finally finished it. And so now it's this like 7-minute almost dance that I do. And it has an interesting position in my morning practice ritual that Sensei has actually modified in a way that's might be interesting to talk about. I was doing it after sitting at first. And as a sort of, like I was saying, as a transition between like the sitting energy and the moving energy, and using the moving energy to go back into my life. You know what I mean by that? Like back in, like into unpredictable situations. Um, but Sensei started to gradually pick up on the fact that this Qigong practice was actually becoming central enough to me that, given the sort of crazy schedule, like timing challenges of my morning practice, which we've talked about a million times, it was a good idea for me to move the Qigong to first thing and then sit after, so that I can make sure that the Qigong happens without any interruption. And then the Zazen happens as long as it happens. And then if the baby wakes up, the baby wakes up, and I don't have to skip Qigong or like rush it or something. So I thought that was an interesting adjustment. And it was a demonstration to me that whatever I'm saying to him about it is clearly something, that this is something fundamental and important to me. And the place I wanted to get to, that I want to leave it to sort of open it up to you, is that after I've done it, 3 or 4 days in a row all the way through for the first time. And yesterday I got to that point that we have talked about. It sort of, work is over and I have to go back out of my office and into my house where my family's all crazy, and I need some sort of transition practice to do. And in the past, I might have sat Zazen for 10 or 15 minutes, even though I find it really hard as a transition out of work. Like, it was so common for me to do that and then feel like I'm just thinking about work the whole time. And yesterday, for the first time, I did my Qigong practice instead. And it was like I completely, I like Men in Black mind wiped myself and had no thoughts of work, and was just completely there and present when I came out. And I was still tired from a long day, but
Yeah.
it was a purely physical sensation. And so I'm starting to, the thing I, and I'm happy to answer kind of whatever skeptical or genuinely curious questions you have about the practice.
No, I'm not necessarily skeptical about it. I actually just don't know that much about it. And I think we've seen the benefits of a lot of these things in science or otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
We know that yoga is good for the body. We know that Tai Chi is good for the body. Don't know that much about Qigong. I'm sure it is as well. And if it can do something like transition you from work to home, considering that you work from home, like, that sounds really awesome. And being able to make these transitions throughout your day, whether you're meditating or, going into the world of unexpected. I mean, it sounds like a useful tool.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And that's a nice way of it's nice to have something to think about as like my useful tool practice, so that I don't have to burden Zazen with that, which, we've talked about in many ways as being a sort of trap for, a risk factor for going sideways in Zazen. Like, now Zazen is just Zazen. And the thing that I can do when I quote unquote need to do something is this active thing that, there's no question of doing or non-doing in this. It's like, there's moves, there's steps, there's things that engage the will, whatever the doer is doing this practice. There's kind of no question about it. And it does result in the same kind of empty space sensation where the ego or, the thinker is supposed to be. Like, when I get into this, it's really a pretty natural, just flowing state that happens. But the fact that it's so short, that it's like this 5-7 minute thing, and that it makes such a big difference over that short of a time, is really kind of changing my whole sense of my practice life. And Sensei is supportive of it too, which is really interesting to me. And it's what it's really doing, I think, which might also be another angle to talk about if you don't want to talk about sort of just like the nuts and bolts of the practice, is that it's expanding my sense of, whatever Zen is, way beyond the sort of formal boundaries of what Soto Zen religious practice is. Because this is an intimately related thing, but it's not something that you learn from your Zen teacher unless you've got a really special old school or Chinese one, Right.
I mean, what is Zen if not a tool for your life?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I mean, you can be dogmatic about it and be like, this is the only tool you should use, but that can't be true, and that can't be helpful to say or to be that dogmatic about it, because whether it's something like qigong or other types of meditation or anything like that. I mean, I exercise, like that's a tool for a lot of things. You could exercise after your practice or before your practice. That could help you transition. Taking a bath, maybe, I don't know, maybe that'll help you
sounds great.
Limber up before the practice. It's not, excluding it from everything else, I don't think it's like super helpful.
Yeah, conceptually there's something about this particular practice that really helps with that idea, which is this feeling that there's sort of this Chinese medicine body, this Taoist body, that is this biological basis for this practice, but also for Zen. Like this is maybe like a little bit of a scholarly or difficult to grasp idea, but you could do worse for an explanation of how Zen happened than to say that Indian Buddhism came over the mountains, with its own yogic body system that it was based on, and landed in China, where they had this whole Taoist body that already happened, that already had its own medicine and its own movement practices and its own meditation practices. And they heard about it and they were like, yeah, that sounds like a nice update. We'll incorporate some of that into what we do. And that's how Zen became Zen. And so there is this Taoist root to Zen, and it has so much more.
Yeah. I've always thought so.
Yeah, I mean,
I read the Tao Te Ching before reading any Buddhist texts.
Yeah, me too, actually, because my mom had her college copy of it at home.
I mean, there's a lot of similarities. I mean, it's mainly because the focus is on sitting. It's on meditation, and that's how you're going to get to where you need to go in your practice and in your life, is through that meditation. You can't do it otherwise. I think that sounds a lot like Zen.
Sure.
Honestly.
But what I'm starting to learn is that there's so many more aspects of life that have sort of documented teachings and practices in that tradition than we go into in Zen. I mean, there are Zen texts about food and cooking and eating, but there's no Zen texts about like health, like diet, I can't think of like a Zen teaching on like what you should eat specifically. And that kind of thing is almost like outside the realm of what formal Zen is concerned with. And that might be because for 1,000 years of Zen's history, it was practiced in China, where this was just sort of like the medical system, and this kind of practice, this kind of movement practice might even be the sort of thing that like the equivalent of a doctor would tell you to do. So like in our society, we have our own nutrition science and our own fitness science and our own medical science. And we Zen practitioners go to the doctor too, or like get, diet advice from people trained in Western medicine. But this is the medicine system that was involved in the development of this practice that we do. And I'm not saying that it makes it better or makes it healthier for me to do, but it definitely feels like it's worth a try. And what's interesting is that it's familiar because of this practice. And I think that's surprising. And I think it's worth investigating
Well, then, even if you were saying about like the history of Zen and Soto Zen specifically, Dogen went to China to learn about Zen. I mean, there's probably a lot of connection there. I would be surprised if there wasn't.
Yeah. So what I'm interested in is why that is less of a big deal in American contemporary Zen. Because it's obvious, like that. This is the thing: is like you read Dogen, and it's basically all about China. Like every story and every reference and every teacher he's talking about is someone from China from 500 years ago. And so like, it's not like it's hidden in the tradition. It's not like the Japanese Zen that you receive as an American these days isn't mostly about China, but the people seem mostly concerned with like their own lineage and their teacher and their teacher's teacher and maybe their teacher's teacher's teacher. And you're not back to China yet by a long shot in almost every case when you're thinking about who these people were and what they did and what they taught. And, you know, Matsuoka Roshi in his books, which were just his collected talks, talks about Japanese culture and Japanese health and fitness and Japanese martial arts and all that stuff all the time. And that's, you know, it's still all related to this. It's still all kind of spiritually descended from this. And maybe it's just a language thing. But what I think I'm interested in and wondering about is like, maybe it's also about that sort of Eastern medicine, Western medicine, like a scientific divide. Like Western people aren't really as ready to consider the possibility that this would work, whereas meditation seems sort of neutral with respect to its health, its effect, its claimed effects on the body. And so you just do it. And then like Western science gradually realizes that it does something interesting to the body, but people are less willing to consider science.
There is always a delay on researching stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, there's a thing, does it work or not? I don't know. We haven't really researched it yet.
Right.
So it's in this spot where it's like, well, since we haven't researched it, that means it doesn't work.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't work until it's proven to work.
That's not really how it works. It's just that that's how people, or at least people who believe in science, because there's a lot of people here that don't, often think of things. If it's not proven yet, I don't want to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But there are plenty of things that have not been proven scientifically that I think do work very well.
And there's scientifically proven things that get thrown out all the time.
But I guess there is a chance that what you're doing is not, I mean, I don't think it with Qigong or anything like that, but I think you do have to evaluate, like, could this thing that hasn't been tested potentially do me harm?
Sure.
And weigh your risks against that, because there are plenty of people who do things and I'm like, well, that seems really dangerous. Like, and even if it did help to a certain degree, you're also risking things not helping. Like, well, there's certain supplementations. Some people take like a whole bunch of supplements.
Mm-hmm.
And I think taking one or two is probably pretty safe. But the more you take, like, the more your kidneys have to process that. Like,
yeah.
And it can cause you more damage than the benefits it's giving you.
Sure.
For example.
Yeah.
So I think that's where, like, a lot of people who are into Zen, I think, like, fall into the scientific camp where they're just like, I don't want to do things unless it's been scientifically proven. Mm-hmm. And we already know that Zen does have great benefits on your mental health and your well-being. So that's not really a hard thing to wrap their head around. Mm-hmm. I've used natural remedies for a few different things, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. So you are running the risk that it's either like A, not going to work, or B, it could do damage if you're not careful.
Right. Like, this isn't going to do anything, or this is a placebo is sort of the more, I would say, the more common objection. I think that your other objection is also very interesting of like, this is an unfamiliar system. Like, you don't know what it does. And we should study that. And yeah, that's true. The thing that got me, and, you know, we've talked about the risks of meditation. Like, I'm take very seriously the risks of spiritual practice done in an uncontained way. I have, like I said, been learning these movements sort of one teeny tiny action at a time, and doing it several times a day for a few minutes for months and months. Like, I've been building it up very slowly. Not necessarily, well, I guess it was sort of out of a caution about wanting to do it right, like not learn it wrong, but also, you know, not really knowing what was going to happen. But the real development over the course of doing this practice was to realize that the effects of this are not mysterious at all. They're very obvious. And the thing I can compare it most closely to is of any other form of exercise, but a certain aspect of it, where it's not like my muscles are tired at the end of this, but there's a feeling I feel like we often attribute to, quote unquote endorphins, like some sort of release of chemicals, dopamine or whatever, like people think they're using science words when they say things like that. But what they're really saying is like, I do exercise and there's some sort of pleasurable release afterwards that makes me feel good. And it feels like a natural reward of my body for this activity that's healthy for me because science says so. And, I don't dispute that is some semblance of what's actually happening, but also the kind of energy that I'm feeling in this practice is so upfront and clear and like I said, familiar, because I've been feeling it the entire time I've been alive. I just sort of didn't know what it was or have a way of working with it. That I kind of feel like a lot of the pleasurable, powerful sensations people get from exercise is also this chi bodily energy sensation. And, waking your body up in this way that is both physical and spiritual by using it and being healthy and strong. And that's really the only kind of principle at play in this system is this is what how the body moves and feels and flows when it's healthy. And that is the only kind of thing that's arising for me in this practice. It's a very intense and profound version of it, but I'm not having any kind of foreign or mysterious sort of spiritual effects, kind of the way I have at certain times in my meditation practice where it's like, whoa, what the hell is going on? Like this is kind of the opposite of that. It's like, finally I'm moving in a natural way. Like I'm releasing muscle tension that I'm holding all the time. And I'm moving unconsciously, just the way that I naturally want to.
Mm. So so you learn like certain motions,
mm-hmm.
And then you memorize that, and then that way you don't have to like think about them when you're doing it, or
yeah, there's a little bit of remembering what happens next, but they flow into each other. So it's this, there's a it's Chinese medicine, so there's a kind of nature cycle involved in it. There's a spring, summer, fall, winter sequence, and they go into each other, and the movements in each season, quote unquote, have sort of energetic qualities of what's happening in nature at that time of year. So the spring ones are about opening up and waking up, and then the summer ones are about being big and alive and strong and moving a lot, and then the fall ones are about sort of gathering it back together and sort of preparing for the end. And then winter is about drawing it inward and becoming slow and quiet, and that's where it ends. So I think of that mostly as just like a reminder almost. There are memorable symbolic aspects to it that make it so that it's not, an effort to remember what to do. And after a while, it's like learning a dance. It's just like, what step comes next. And yeah, there's really very little thinking involved at this point for me, except at the end that I've just started doing, in the last few days. But I know how the beginning feels, and I know that in a month or two, the whole sequence will just feel like one unified action.
Do you have any goals with the Qigong practice? Do you want to experiment with that, like integrate it more into your Zen practice? Like, would you do, like, instead of walking meditation, like Qigong, like in between two sitting periods or something?
That's a cool idea. I'm doing both now. I'm doing Qigong before, and I'm doing Qigong after. But that's the answer is definitely yes. But here's how I think I would answer that question about what my goals for it are in terms of Zen practice. I think it's the thing that's successfully exploding the idea that Zazen is the time when I'm doing Zen practice. Like I don't believe that intellectually, But we always say it in a maybe almost always purely intellectual way. Like, you should do Zen. Like, Zen practices all the time. Sitting is not when Zen practice is happening. Sitting is just the expression of Zen practice, which is happening all the time. And you're doing Zen when you're sitting, standing, walking, lying down. You're doing Zen when you're washing the dishes. You're doing Zen when you're changing the diapers. And we say all of those things. And I believe all of those things. And I notice it from time to time that it's happening. But now there really is an action that I'm taking that feels like not just that it's a Zen practice while I'm doing it, but that it changes my whole body in such a way that I'm physically carrying this Zen attitude all the time in my body, and that it's changing the way that my body feels and works in order to support that. So I'm giving myself permission to think of this moving thing as my practice, and Zazen as just one aspect of that, rather than fixating on Zazen as sort of the essential thing without which there is no Zen.
I mean, does that make you feel guilty at all to think about it that way?
No, it makes me feel awesome. I think I felt guilty before for taking Zen too seriously when it tells you all the time not to do that. Householders is a production of the Atlanta Soto Zen Center in Atlanta, Georgia, and the Silent Thunder Order. Find us on the web at ASZC.org.
Our Sangha depends on your support. You can donate by PayPal to donate at storder.org. Gasho.